Think about the last time you cooked rice. Maybe it was last night, a pot of white rice beside a curry, or fried rice from leftovers, or a bowl of sushi rice rolled into something you were proud of. Rice is probably the single most eaten food on Earth. Over half the world's population depends on it as their primary daily calorie source, and yet almost nobody in the modern world has ever watched rice being harvested. They've never seen what the fields looked like just before the crop comes in. They have never heard the sound a rice harvester makes at full speed, and they have almost certainly never heard of the mini rice harvester, a machine that has quietly become one of the most transformative pieces of agricultural technology in Asia and is now spreading across the world, changing forever who does the work of bringing in the rice harvest and how fast it gets done. The world harvests over 1 trillion pounds of rice every single year. Today, we are going inside that harvest, the ancient crop, the revolutionary machine, the science, the people, and the extraordinary story of what happens when a technology so simple and so affordable starts replacing a labor system that has sustained billions of human beings for thousands of years. Let's go. Rice is the oldest continuously cultivated cereal crop in the history of human civilization. Domesticated in China somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 years ago along the banks of the Yangtze River, rice cultivation spread across Asia over millennia and became the agricultural foundation of some of the most complex and enduring civilizations on Earth. Today, rice is grown on every continent except Antarctica, in over 100 countries by an estimated 1 billion small-scale farming households who depend on it for both food and income. The global rice harvest covers over 400 million acres of farmland, an area larger than the entire United States east of the Mississippi River, and produces somewhere between 9 and 10 trillion pounds of paddy rice every single year. China and India together account for more than half of global production, followed by Indonesia, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Thailand, Myanmar, and the Philippines. In the United States, rice is grown primarily in Arkansas, Louisiana, California, Mississippi, Missouri, and Texas, with Arkansas alone producing roughly half of all American rice from the flat, rich farmland of the Arkansas Delta. The scale of global rice production is almost impossible to fully comprehend. It is not just a crop, it is the foundation of civilization for half the species. Before we get into how rice is harvested, you need to understand something about how rice grows that makes it unlike almost any other major grain crop, and it starts with water. Most people know that rice grows in flooded fields called paddies. What most people do not know is exactly why. Rice does not technically need to be flooded to grow. It can survive in regular, moist soil. But flooding the field does something incredibly important. It suppresses weeds. The weeds that would compete with rice for nutrients and sunlight cannot survive underwater. The rice, which has evolved over thousands of years of cultivation in flooded conditions, absolutely can. Flooding the field is therefore not primarily about watering the rice, it is about killing the competition without herbicides, using water as a natural weed management tool that human farmers discovered thousands of years ago and that modern farmers still rely on today. This means rice farming begins not with planting, but with water management, controlling the inflow and outflow of water across perfectly leveled fields in a system of bunds, canals, and pumps that can involve engineering on a scale most people would never associate with growing a grain. The rice growing season varies by region, but follows a broadly similar pattern across most of Asia. Fields are plowed and flooded, seedlings are grown in nursery beds and then transplanted into the flooded field by hand or machine at precise spacings, and the crop grows in the flooded condition through the vegetative stage. As the crop approaches maturity, typically 90 to 130 days after transplanting, depending on the variety, the field is drained, allowing the soil to dry enough to support harvesting equipment without getting stuck. The grain matures on the standing panicles, the seed heads that hold the individual rice kernels, and the color of the crop transitions from deep green to golden yellow as the grain fills and dries. A field of ripe rice ready for harvest is one of the most beautiful sights in agriculture. Row after row of golden stems heavy with grain, moving in waves in the breeze, the color of the field a pure harvest gold that painters have tried to capture for centuries. Now here's where the story gets genuinely revolutionary, because for the most of the 10,000 years that humans have been growing rice, harvesting it was backbreaking manual labor. Farmers waded into the drained but still muddy fields with hand sickles, cut the rice stems in bundles, carried those bundles to the field edge, and threshed them by hand to separate the grain from the straw. A single farmer could harvest roughly a quarter to half an acre per day using hand methods, which means harvesting a typical small Asian rice farm of 2 to 3 acres required a week or more of exhausting labor for a full family, and larger farms required entire communities working cooperatively to bring in the harvest before rain or weather could damage the standing crop. For thousands of years, the rice harvest was the most labor-intensive, most time-critical, and most socially organizing event of the agricultural year across the Asian countryside. The full-size combine harvester, the machine that transformed wheat and corn harvesting in the United States and Europe, exists in rice production too, and it is widely used on large flat rice farms in Arkansas, California, and the major commercial rice-producing regions of Thailand and Vietnam. But in much of Asia, the farms are small, often less than 2 acres. The fields are irregular in shape. The bund walls between paddies are narrow. The terrain is hilly or terraced, and a full-size combine worth hundreds of thousands of dollars simply cannot navigate the landscape or be justified by the scale of the operation. This is exactly the problem that the mini rice harvester solves, and it solves it so elegantly and so affordably that it has transformed rice harvesting across Asia in a remarkably short period of time. The mini rice harvester, also called a walking-type harvester or a small combine, is a compact, self-propelled machine that typically runs on tracks rather than wheels, allowing it to navigate the soft, muddy conditions of a drained rice paddy without getting bogged down. It cuts the rice stalks at the base, feeds them through a threshing drum that separates the grain from the straw, cleans the grain with a fan system, and deposits the clean grain into a collection bag or bin, all in one continuous pass through the field. A single operator can harvest an acre of rice in 2 to 3 hours with a mini harvester, a task that would take a family of 5 a full day or more by hand, and the machines cost between $3,000 and $15,000 depending on the model and capacity, affordable enough for a cooperative of smallholder farmers to share or for a contractor to purchase and operate commercially across dozens of small farms during harvest season. The spread of the mini rice harvester across Asia over the past 2 decades has been one of the most significant and least reported agricultural transformations in recent history. In countries like China, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and India, the percentage of rice harvested by machine has risen from near zero to over 70 or 80% in some regions within a single generation. The implications are profound and not entirely simple. On the positive side, mechanization has dramatically reduced the physical suffering associated with rice harvesting, the back pain, the heat exposure, the cuts and injuries from hand sickles, and the sheer exhaustion of days of wading through muddy fields in tropical heat. It has freed millions of rural women in particular from one of the most physically demanding agricultural tasks of the year. And it has reduced post-harvest losses. Grain that spoils or is damaged in the field while waiting for a large enough labor crew to harvest it can now be brought in more quickly and more cleanly. On the more complicated side, the displacement of harvest labor has removed a source of seasonal income from some of the most economically vulnerable agricultural communities in the world. The landless laborers and migrant workers who depended on rice harvest wages as a critical part of their annual income. In Bangladesh, India, and parts of Southeast Asia, the transition to mechanized harvesting has been rapid enough to create genuine economic disruption in communities where harvest labor income was not easily replaced by other opportunities. The people who operate mini rice harvesters in Asia today are a new kind of rural entrepreneur, mechanization service providers, who own one or more machines and travel from village to village during the harvest season, offering their services to smallholder farmers who cannot afford their own machine. In Bangladesh, these operators are often young men from farming families who took out loans to purchase their first harvester, built a reputation for reliable and skilled service, and gradually expanded to operating multiple machines across a territory. The skill of operating a mini harvester effectively, maintaining the correct cutting height, managing the threshing drum settings for different varieties, minimizing grain loss in difficult field conditions, is real agricultural expertise that takes a season or two to develop properly. And the economic model of the custom harvesting contractor has proven remarkably durable and scalable across very different cultural and agricultural contexts in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The challenges facing the rice farming industry globally are significant and growing. Climate change is disrupting the monsoon patterns that provide the irrigation water for much of Asia's rain-fed rice production, creating both more severe droughts and more damaging floods that can destroy a standing rice crop in days. The introduction of herbicide-resistant weed strains is threatening the weed suppression benefits of the traditional flooded production system. And rice cultivation is a significant source of methane emissions, a powerful greenhouse gas produced by the anaerobic decomposition of organic matter in flooded fields, which puts the crop under increasing environmental scrutiny as the world tries to reduce agricultural emissions. New rice varieties developed by institutions like the International Rice Research Institute are being bred for drought tolerance, flood tolerance, reduced methane emissions, and higher nutrient content, including golden rice varieties fortified with vitamin A to address deficiency diseases that affect millions of children in rice-dependent communities. The next time you lift the lid on a pot of cooked rice and watch the steam rise, think about where it started.